About 15 years ago, I worked as a deckhand on a line of boats that took people out to Fort Sumter. The trip was about an hour each way. One day, we were about halfway there, and two teenagers decided it would be fun to jump off and try to swim to shore. This is in Charleston Harbor, which has a pretty solid tidal current, lots of boat traffic, and probably more sharks than one would like to think about. We ended up having to perform a water rescue on them. Then continued on to the fort, with the Coast Guard coming and picking them up. All in all, an extreme act of stupidity. Led a scuba diving tour. While signing the safety waivers and all that, one very old man kept telling us that he had a DNR, do not resuscitate. We plainly told him that we are not bound to a DNR, and if he passed out for any reason we would attempt to resuscitate by our safety training. Pretty much all the divers are assuming this guy's gonna kill himself down there, prob spit out the reg, and go quietly into the night. Dive happens, pretty much everyone is hawkied on this guy. I see him go behind a large coral head and lay down in the sand and spit out his reg. He is only at about 60 feet, so I grab him and wrestle him to the surface. He will not take my backup regulator, so I slam it against his mouth and purge air into his face. We get to the surface, and he is fighting me non-stop trying to pull all of his gear off. I throw a very hard punch to his jaw and knock him out. Actually trained to do this during dive rescues, to keep the panicked person from killing you too. 3 weeks later, and he tries to sue my dive shop and myself personally. TLDR, guy tried to kill himself. I used to do vineyard and garden tours for a pretty well-known winery. I had a lady ask to see any male at vines we had, so I walked her over, and she proceeded to dump ash all over them, and yell "We love you Nana. Rest in peace." Needless to say, you are not allowed to dump human remains on food goods. I should mention the ashes came out of a gallon Ziploc baggie. It was a Christmas themed one, so maybe that makes it more tasteful. I'm a bush pilot in Alaska and occasionally do glacier air tours if my boss asks. I'm not a fan of doing tours. One day I'm doing a glacier tour and had probably 7 people on board, and the dude sitting next to just looks at me and says I'm the captain now and yanks the plane 30 degrees to the right and then lets go and laughs, saying he was just kidding. There was yelling to follow via my mouth. Loki, you're a child of God for not just knocking him out the second you landed safely. Used to be a tour guide at a primate sanctuary with a strict no touching policy. At the end of the tour there's a suspension bridge. Tourists go first, guide goes last as per the rules. I always warn the tourists that the other side is the territory of a Hanuman Langur, and he doesn't fuck around, keep your distance, etc. He doesn't attack people out of nowhere, but he likes showing his teeth and screaming, which scares tourists. Anyway, one tour I get to the other side of the bridge, and a tourist got bitten. He says a monkey just bit him out of nowhere. Asked the other tourists, no, he tried to fucking pet the Hanuman. Dumbus got what he deserved. I like to imagine he looked like this. On an open-top tour bus in London, woman tries to dangle her toddler over the railing, then starts saying she's going to complain to my manager. When I told her to stop, caught her doing it again, and company policy said that anyone endangering their kids like that was to be removed from the tour, so the driver had to come up and march her off. She still insisted she did nothing wrong. Like, she literally had the kid's feet on the side rail of the moving bus and was just holding him loosely round the waist. One low-hanging tree branch, of which there were many on the route, and that kid was gone. Worked at an aquarium. This dude arrived in the Amazon exhibit room featuring the tank where every fish in it can hurt you, and promptly started dangling his sister's kid over the exhibit. I immediately stepped up to him and pushed the kid back from over it, firmly explaining that this wasn't allowed and that I'd have to call security. Thank God, the kid's mother was on my side and started tearing into the man. It took her 5 minutes of no, that was absolutely not appropriate, for him to get the message that he'd seriously fucked up. Some people never do get the whole "pointy venomous fish bad, no dangling kids" thing. Was on a tour in New Orleans. Guy gets drunk and basically makes a fool of himself and slaps his partner. Everyone else on the tour is like "whoa, not cool, take a hike." GF leaves with him. Next morning we are all on the bus waiting to roll out to the next destination and we are not moving. 30 minutes later we are all getting pissed off. Then the couple get on the bus looking sheepish. By the next stop we learn the drunk guy ran a bath at the hotel, passed out and it flooded the bathroom and 4 floors below into the hotel lobby. The hotel wouldn't let them leave without paying thousands of dollars. Karma for him. Not a tour guide, but was doing an English language camp for foreign kids. Took the kids on a day trip to London, which involved going up the London Eye. While in the queue, one of the kids started shouting that he had a bomb in his bag and he was going to blow everyone up. Almost got all 20 kids in the group kicked out. Somewhat relevant, there's a small hill on a pedestrian footpath outside my university. Once, I witnessed a Segway tour attempt to use this path. The first Segway slowed to a stop as it reached the top of this hill. The second Segway sped up in an attempt to make it over and crashed into the first Segway. One by one, each Segway crashed into the one in front of it, toppling over each other. The pathway now has a no bikes or Segway sign. I was working on a tourist island in Australia when this man pulled out almost all the back feathers of a peacock because he wanted to keep one. He sneaked up behind it and grabbed a huge handful and yanked them all out. He was immediately escorted off the island. The peacock had a huge bare patch and most of its beautiful feathers were gone. I have never seen peacock enclosures that didn't have feathers on the ground. So it's doubly bad, because if the guy had just been observant he probably could have gotten feathers without harming any of the birds. I used to work at a heritage site. It was an old military installation with a lot of remaining original structures, bunk beds, cafeteria equipment, computers etc. Every day it was a constant effort to remind people, read, kids, not to jump on the beds, not to slam doors open, not to punch every button like it owes them money. The absolute worst was a group of kids on a school trip. Within the first 10 minutes we are walking through the tech portion of the exhibit, where we had a wall lined with Burroughs large systems machines, B5000s, all behind this little fence about waist high. I turned to demonstrate some of the pieces, and when I look back at the group one of them had jumped over the barrier, opened one of the units, and started pulling out handfuls of digital tape from the reels inside. I just about jumped on the kid when their teacher did just that. She jumped the barrier, smacked the kid's hands, and took him outside. I immediately ended the tour and had them all refunded, as I couldn't imagine what else could happen. They took a big shit in front of the group. So, we tour through streets and parks, and make it really clear that the toilets at the beginning of the tour are the only ones for the first 90 minutes of tour. We get to a park about 30 minutes into the tour. Not a big park mind you, it is basically a big roundabout with a swing set, bench and 2 trees. I'm in the middle of my spiel in the park when I see a guy at the back of the group step away, pull his pants down, and squat on the grass. Of course I was stunned and lost my flow, which had everyone looking around, only to recoil in horror as this guy drops a log like it was nothing. He wasn't even ashamed. I work at a brewery taproom and take people on brewery tours. During fermentation CO2 is produced and excess comes out through a runoff pipe and into a water bucket. One of the attendees, who was being a pain and trying to be funny but nobody was laughing, asked me what the pipe was for, so I gladly explained. He then asked what would happen if he breathed it in. In disbelief of his stupidity I told him he would pass out / damage his brain. He then proceeded to grab the pipe and take a breath. He was then ejected and barred. Some people are just beyond belief. Ugh. My first batch of homebrew, the kind you make with extract and plastic pails. It was finally time to bottle. I took the lid off the pail and wanted to get a whiff of this delicious creation I made. Stuck my head in the bucket completely forgetting about the CO2 blanket. Coughed and about passed out. So stupid. Realized what I had done and what was happening nearly immediately. Just too excited in the moment. Edit, a word. Took a class of middle schoolers to a museum, and one of my asshole students dragged his hand across a 3,000-year-old Indian painting. Later on I found out the object was almost certainly a reproduction, but I nearly died of rage on the spot. Edit, the student was with us on a 45-day placement for severe behavioral issues. He earned enough point in school to qualify for the field trip. Never again. Thank everything that was a reproduction, though. Not me. My best friend's tour guide on an island off the Australian coast. He saw one of the tour ignore the huge signs warning people not to go to the edge of the water. Predictably, the tourist gets hit by a huge wave, swept out to sea. I know it was the worst thing the tour guide ever saw, because he and my best friend both went into the sea to rescue the tourist, and they both died. Funniest guy I ever met. Miss him most days. The tourist who caused it all? Predictably, he survived. Pretty sure he doesn't feel too good about the whole thing. Jesus dude, sorry to hear that. This made national news, and it's tough to hear it straight from somebody who was so close to the victims. Friend of mine does tours of whiskey museums in Dublin. Someone took a shit in one of the exhibition rooms. Why is there always that one fucker? I watched a man run up the side of the platform the winged victory statue is on in the Louvre and throw his arm around it for a photo. Security got him down pretty quickly. I'm shocked he actually made it up there. I actually had a very hard time with the Louvre because of shit like this. So many camera flashes at point blank. People constantly touching shit that really shouldn't be touched. Everywhere I looked there was someone being a shithead to something irreplaceable. I was in the part that was still set up like a palace and came into a room to find some dude holding a 500-year-old Chinese tapestry up to his face and fucking rubbing it between his fingers. I lost it on him a bit, asking what the fuck he was thinking, why he would do something like that, and his only response was I wanted to see, and shrugging. Ultimately, I trust the folks that put stuff on exhibit to have weighed the risks of this sort of moron's impact vs the value of sharing access with the world, but holy hell does it make my blood boil. I'm in the middle of talking and someone's phone rings. Okay, that happens sometimes, and usually they'd just cancel the call or step outside. Nope, this guy answers the call and starts talking on the phone, only a few meters from where I'm standing. I think, oh, he'll just quickly explain he's busy and end the call. Nope. He starts a conversation. The rest of the group glare at him, and I'm put in an awkward position because my workplace put a huge emphasis on politeness. So I suggest to him to continue his call in the hallway, just outside the room we were in, to which he replied no, I'm fine here, and went back to his phone conversation. I'm doing my best to talk to the rest of the group, about 25 people, but he's so loud. Eventually this Chinese woman yells across the room at him, shut up, we want to listen to the lady, not you, which worked. But I just couldn't imagine the nerve to ruin everyone's experience like that, cause you're too selfish to talk on the phone outside. Also, the place I worked allowed photos, but had a strict no photos of the staff rule for privacy reasons. I always explained this at the start and 99% of people were cool. One day I had a particularly happy snapper who got right up in a staff member's face to take a photo, like I'm taking centimeters from his face to take a photo. The staffer was just some rando middle-aged white dude, so I'm not sure why the fascination, but he was livid. It's like I saw it happen in slow motion, so couldn't do anything to stop it. That guy was removed from the tour. I had a guest snorkeling try and grab the tail of a barracuda as he swam up behind it. Luckily I was able to hit the guest with a dive fin from the boat to stop him before he got a hold. If he had grabbed on, I'm sure he would have been ripped to pieces by that fish. I bet he was mad you hit him too. I work in the backcountry ski guiding industry, working my way to becoming a lead guide. Guests are always trying to kill themselves, but here's one that stands out. Right now I mostly tail guide and pick people up when they fall, which is most of the time. One particularly deep day I'm sweeping a tree run and all of a sudden there's a man digging frantically in the snow towards a pair of legs. His wife had fallen headfirst downslope in a flattish area. When she lawn darted, the first half of her body was buried in the snow and only her legs and feet were visible. Her husband thought it was a good idea to stand on top where her face obviously was and start digging near the exposed part of her body. I guess in the moment he forgot about human anatomy and where her head might be. At this point I was maybe 3 minutes behind them, so she'd had her face under the surface for a while. I told him to stop and move. Yelled stop, you're on her face. I tried added a couple expletives but nothing. I finally had to grab him by the backpack and powerbomb him down the slope. I uncovered her face in under 10 seconds. She gasped for air, had a cry, and then proceeded to tear that man to pieces verbally. Couple of guys I used to play cricket with went on a school trip to Auschwitz and decided to steal a small pair of glasses and some buttons they found half buried in the ground. They were detained by Polish police while they were leaving the site. Hard to know what goes through people's heads sometimes. On the subject of Auschwitz, I work with a dude whose go-to badass story is that he snorted coke while walking around Auschwitz. I've probably heard him tell 25 people or so the same story, and every person kind of looks at him like he's a fucking piece of shit, and then they try and change the subject. To this day I don't think he understands why no one sees it as badass. Thanks for watching, and remember to like the video.